Hello everyone and welcome to round 1 of yesterday's Superbet Chess Classic. It's Wesley versus Shakhriyar Mamedyarov, and if you guys remember, Mamedyarov won last year's event, and it's already very interesting that in round 1 we get a decisive game in classical time format, and also this is the only game from round 1 that did not end in a draw, as you'll see after we check out the game. So without further ado, let's check it out. Wesley has the white pieces, and we're going to have a very nice line of the Nimzo-Indian defense. Not an exotic one, as you guys are used to. We've been having a lot of rapid and blitz games lately. This is classical chess, so of course the lines must also be classical worthy. So here we have d4 by Wesley, knight to f6, c4, e6, knight to c3, and of course bishop to b4. The Nimzo-Indian defense is on the board. e3, we have castles by Mamedyarov, and now bishop to d3. Mamedyarov strikes in the center with the d5, c captures, e captures, and now knight to e2 is by far the most popular here. Wesley goes for a3 first. He challenges the bishop, asking, are you maybe interested in capturing the knight here? But black doesn't really gain anything by capturing it in this line, so we just bring it back. Bishop to d6 makes sense to keep the bishop pair. Queen to c2, developing the queen, putting pressure on the h7 pawn. a6, and only now knight g to e2. We have rook to e8, and Wesley castles. We have b6 by Mamedyarov, b4 now, grabbing more space on the queen side, knight b to d7, and knight to f4. And the position has been reached before, even this year in the FIDE Grand Prix that was played in Belgrade. It was reached in the game between Rapport and Vidit, and in that game bishop to b7 was played by Vidit. Rapport was able to win that game, even though bishop to b7 is the absolute top move recommended by the engine. But here Mamedyarov plays a different move. He plays bishop captures on f4, and it is now as of move 12 that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Wesley goes about this. Of course, you have to capture. You are down a piece, so e captures on f4, and now you have a doubled f pawn, but you have very nice control over the e5 square if you can somehow utilize this to your advantage. So here c5, of course we want to get rid of this backwards pawn, so we want to trade it here. c5, d captures on c5, b captures, and now rook to d1, putting the rook on the same file as the queen. Bishop to b7, and now knight to a4, putting more pressure on that c5 pawn. So here you have to react to this. c4 by Mamedyarov, attacking the bishop, and the bishop to f5. Now we have a5, challenging the b4 pawn, and here we have bishop to e3. Here Wesley just continues developing. A captures on b4, a captures, and now queen to e7, developing the queen. Rook 8 to b1, preparing to push the past b pawn, and g6, now challenging the bishop. And while you might bring the bishop back here, Wesley just trades it. Bishop for knight, bishop captures on d7, knight captures, and now goes knight to c3. So here, now that the position calmed down a little bit, you can see that Wesley has this very nice passed b pawn, whereas Mamedyarov has two connected passed pawns, the c pawn and the d pawn. So who will be able to push their pawns faster? Knight to f6, now adding a defender to the d5 pawn, as Wesley was threatening to just pick it up, and now bishop to d4. And here this is a very unpleasant situation for Mamedyarov. This bishop is just a monster piece. You can see that the dark square bishop is much better than the light square bishop. Here the light square bishop is locked in by its own pawn on d5, and it's not really controlling all that many squares. You might be able to remaneuver it somewhere, but until you're able to push this pawn to d4 and open up this diagonal, it's never going to be as useful as Wesley's dark square bishop. Plus, it's bishops of opposite colors, so if it's going to be an attacking game, it will be as if Mamedyarov is down a piece. Of course, you guys know this, but it's always nice to mention it. So the dark squares are incredibly weak. If you can, get your queen all the way to h6, there might even be some checkmating ideas. All in all, it's much easier to play this for Wesley. And well, the one thing Mamedyarov has going for him are the two connected pass pawns, which are now blockaded, and you cannot start pushing them. So here, knight to h5, and also just there's just the threat of bishop captures knight, and then you can just pick up the d5 pawn. So there's even that if Wesley ever wants to get rid of the the bishop? Probably not. You would not trade this positional advantage for one pawn, but if he can calculate that it's winning, then why not? So knight to h5, going after the f4 pawn, queen to d2. Wesley defends it. We have f6 now, and pawn to h3. So it's important to give your king a little bit of a breathing room here. The queen and rook are doubled up on the e file. If something terrible happens, you might even get checkmated. We give up the queen, rook delivers checkmate. You never know. So h3, always a good idea. We have knight to g7, now remaneuvering the knight to f5, and bishop to c5 now, challenging the queen here. Queen to f7 and knight to b5 now, winning the d6 square. So of course, if the knight lands, then that's just game over. It's going to be game-winning fork. So knight to f5, Mamedyarov defends the d6 square, and here Wesley plays knight back to d4. Interestingly, if you play g4, which is something every one of us would play in a blitz game, or maybe in a rapid game, it's just dead lost, because now you've allowed the d4, and that's the power of freeing the bishop. It doesn't matter what white plays, just queen d5, and you're getting checkmated. There's no avoiding this. For example, f3, queen captures. Okay, your queen is now guarding some squares here, but there's rook to a2. Just beautiful, beautiful stuff. Queen captures. We're going to play queen to h1 check, king wherever, doesn't really matter, and queen to g2 will be checkmate. So you really have to be careful not to allow black to execute this d4 move. So here knight back to d4, queen back to d7, and now rook to e1, offering a trade of rooks. We have king f7, and now Wesley trades a pair of rooks. Rook captures, we have rook captures, and now rook to a1, winning the a file for himself, hoping to get that rook all the way to a7, but of course Mamedyarov doesn't allow this. Wesley declines the trade, plays rook e1, and Mamedyarov repeats rook to e8. So Wesley not interested in a repetition. He decides to trade here. Rook captures, queen captures, and now finally knight captures on f5, g captures on f5, and now Wesley was also successful in doubling Mamedyarov's f-pawn here, but it's now just opposite colored bishop's game, and it's going to be very, very hard to push for any advantage. But we know what we simply cannot allow black to do. We can't allow black to play d4. Black will play d4 even if it means giving up a pawn, just to open up this diagonal and create some counterplay. So here just bishop to d4. Let's keep that bishop boxed in. Our bishop is just much better than black's light square bishop. So here we have bishop to c6 and f3 now, trying to improve the position as much as possible before doing some radical changes to the structures. We have h5 and queen to f2 now. We have queen to f8 going after the b4 pawn. Now just queen to b2, guarding the pawn, also putting pressure on that f6 pawn, so you have to defend it. And while Mamedyarov could just defend it with queen to d6, he decides to keep it active. He plays queen to b8. He goes after the f4 pawn, and now interestingly Wesley doesn't grab the pawn because well, it's weird, but probably after bishop captures, queen captures, and let's say bishop g7, it's not all that easy to play this with black, and there's just not enough time to open up the position to make the light square bishop useful. So while it would be very, very interesting, Wesley decides against this. He plays queen to d2 first. Now just keeps an eye on the b4 pawn. Now comes king g6. Mamedyarov brings his king to safety. Queen e3 now. Now Wesley is offering the pawn, but here if you capture the pawn, then just queen e6, and now you cannot keep an eye on the f6 pawn and on the bishop. So now you are just dead lost. So after this, king to f7 was played. Now bishop to c3. Now we guard the pawn, bishop to d7, and king to h2. We have queen to d6, and now king to g3. Wesley going for a nice little king march here on the king side, preparing something very, very cool. As you'll see, king g6. We have king to h4 even. Now look at this pawn structure. The white king is completely safe there. We have bishop to b5, now just queen to d4, keeping the pressure on the position, so black cannot leave the defense of the f6 pawn. Bishop to d7, we have queen to d2 now, bishop back to c6, and now bishop to d4. We have bishop to d7, g3 now, bishop to e8, and queen to b2. Again, putting pressure on the b pawn, preparing to push on the f pawn and preparing to push the b pawn. So queen to c6, keeping an eye on the b5 square. Now comes queen to a3. Now the white queen will get a lot more active if you can activate it this way. So queen to a4, Mamedyarov offers a queen trade. Now queen back to e3, hoping to get to that e6 square, but of course queen to d7. And it seems that there's no way for white to make any sort of a breakthrough here, but there is one. So feel free to pause the video and try to find this beautiful idea while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting that black simply cannot keep defending the two weaknesses. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is pawn to b5. So congratulations to everyone who spotted this. Yes, the weaknesses are the e6 square and the b5 square, and black queen cannot keep an eye on both of those. So here Mamedyarov just played queen captures on b5, and he also resigned the game here because it's a forced checkmate in 7 for Wesley. We will show it, of course, queen to e6. We just go after the pawn. You can see how the king is also an attacking piece now. Queen to c6, we offer a queen trade plus defend the f6 pawn, but now queen g8 check, king h6, and now the incredible g4. That's why it was important to have the king on h4 to make this attack work, and there's simply no defense against g5. g5 captures will be checkmate, and even if you trade everything captures, and after captures and captures, again, there's no defense against g5. This will be checkmate. Whatever black plays doesn't really matter, g5, and that's it. Captures is checkmate. And another thing after this b5 idea, even if you don't capture the pawn, then you're just allowing it to advance. And again, the black queen will not be able to keep an eye on the e6 square and on the b7 square. And the light square bishop is completely boxed in. Not just now, it's completely boxed in for pretty much the entire game. So you can see how dangerous it can be to fianchetto your light square bishop with your pawn on d5 and c4. So while c4 was kind of mandatory for you to play in this game, it really just made this bishop a terrible piece. And of course, like I said, if you play queen to e6, sorry, not queen to e6, if you play something like after this b5 move, if you play something like well, it's hard to even find a move here for black. There's nothing. Like you play queen to f7, we can just keep advancing the pawn, b6, and still, I mean, you will not be able to defend this. If you play bishop to c6, now we go queen to a3, we go after queen to a7, there's just no stopping this pawn. You will have to it's just impossible to prevent it. The queen now has access to the a7 square, to the d6 square, where you can again pressure the f6 square. So the position is just too overwhelming. But Mamedyarov wants none of this. After queen captures on b5, he just played it and he resigned the game, and that's it. Wesley wins their first round game, and also he's the only player to win the game in round 1. These are the results of round 1. I know you guys were very much looking forward to seeing Caruana versus Firouzja, as Alireza did not pretty much play any chess for the past 5 months after reaching that 2800 rating. Also interestingly, Alireza is the only current 2800 player in this event. As you guys know, Magnus, Ding, and Alireza are the only 3 2800 players in the world. But here, yeah, you can see all the games ended in a draw. Wesley defeated Mamedyarov. And also, if you guys are interested, maybe as some additional info, this is the current classical rating. So you can see that Carlsen, Ding, and Firouzja are above 2800, and then in the top 10 you have Caruana, Rapport, Nepomniachtchi, Wesley So, Levon Aronian, Anish Giri, and Hikaru Nakamura breaks into the top 10. And then you have in the top from 11 to 20 Mamedyarov, Dominguez Perez, Rajabov, Anand, Duda, Vashir Lagrave, Karyakin, Grishuk, Wang Hao, and Topalov still in the top 20. So just a little bit of extra info if you guys were interested. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. You can see how the Nimzo-Indian never disappoints in terms of well, just how strong it is and how entertaining it is. I would like to thank Michael Colbert, Asher Fine, Joshua Hadley, Quincy, and Bonifete Berto for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and the coverage of this wonderful event, as it's been a while since we had a nice classical event. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. See you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.